after, yes, we are presuming for 1 to 2 years, we have some immunity if the virus doesn't change much in mutations. So as you see here, a lot of things are not very sure. Then what is not clear? How many cases remain unknown due to insufficient test capacity? In Switzerland, I think it's maximum 30 to 50%, but I don't know it. In Switzerland, only the cases with strong symptoms and special groups were tested. And so an estimation of the unreported cases must be made. We have no real figures. Second, how many cases are asymptotic? I think it's about 2 times, about the same amount of asymptotic cases than cases with symptoms. Others say it's a factor of X, 10 or more. I have here 3 evidences that this factor of 2 is quite correct. So first, from the Diamond Princess, this ship where a lot of people were on it for 70 days. Then measurements of Iceland and a little cohort in Zurich Homes. But also here, we don't know absolutely, figure it's only an estimation from my side. So how high is now the number of undetected cases? So the unrecognized from point H and I. Is it a factor 2.5 to 3? In Switzerland, as I think, in Ticino, perhaps up to 5 because they are more affected. Others say it's up to 40, 30, 40. And this means that we have no real information. But if my estimations are correct, in Zurich, in the canton of Zurich, only 0.4 to 0.6% of people would be infected. All the rest are not infected. And also in Ticino, it's maximum 4%. So this is not a lot, but we don't know it. Are there any alternatives to slowing down the virus until we have a vaccine or medication? I think no. And this will also slowly become a common sense. The only what really I know for sure, and I can say also for you, it's certain that the virus is not transmitted via the computer. So this is the knowledge that we don't have or have. Now, targets. We have some targets that I assume as first. We have a protecting of the health of as many people as possible. We cannot protect everybody. We should save the health systems from collapse. We have seen in the world that in Switzerland it worked very well. In other countries it was worse. We have also to do a prevention of collateral damage by stopping necessary interventions other than corona, and so risking other deaths. So I think in heart attacks, if you don't go to the people right to the hospital because everybody waits on COVID-19, we will lose other lives. So this is also a risk to prevent. Then on the economic side, we have to reduce the damage to the economy. In Switzerland, we have a damage of several hundred millions a day, up to 5 billion a week. And this we should reduce as quick as possible. So for that, we need gradual opening shops, public traffic, schools, restaurants, culture, sport, and so on. So it's necessary, the target, to gradually increase the freedom of the population, including the elderly persons. For example, the visits by dementia sufferers, they don't absolutely not understand why nobody wants to visit them. And also those with a history of disease. And this freedom should be as a situation as it returns to normal. We should go as quick as possible to a normal situation. So also we should allow the freedom of travel, also internationally, again, step by step. So also a global normalization, I think, should be a target for all of us. And what we absolutely should avoid is a cascade of a restart of lock down, restart, lockdown, because this is bad for all of us, for economy, for society, and for health. So they are targets. And out of this, I said, if I have only this knowledge, I have these targets, what we should do. And there have some key points. And it's not only the app. The app is one important, to me, very important thing to go to this crisis. First, we need absolutely serial tests of antibodies and also PCR of about 5,000 to 10,000 people to determine the immunity and the dark cipher in Switzerland, perhaps in according to region, age, and so on. So to really to clarify this factor of 2 to 5 or 10 or 20 in the next weeks. And I said this a month ago, we should do this. Till now, we have no data collected that can help us to find this number. But this is absolutely necessary. So then the next should be, when we now restart, we should do targeted PCR tests of the surroundings of the still active virulence. So approximately, as I estimate today about 5,000 people are still virulent, and it would help that all people, that we have this history of these people in order to specify how much cases we can identify very quick, also such without any symptoms. Perhaps we need for this about 10 to 20,000 PCR tests. And this should be possible with the capacity that Switzerland has. So I think these 2 points, so testing and to find more clear situation, how worse the situation is, how many people are immunized, how big is the dark cipher, that we should know before we start anything, because without data, it's very difficult to discuss in the midst. And then I think we should introduce of a voluntary app. It's absolutely clear. This app must be voluntary in a land as Switzerland, or also for me, Germany and Austria. And it's not primarily, it should be local and anonymous. I think it's important to do this when it's possible. But it should use an intelligent algorithm, then automatically warnings go to potential infected persons after they have a positive test. So then we win a lot of time when this warning is very quick, and to ask these contacts to perform also a PCR test and to go in a self-quarantine till they have a test that is negative and they go out, or then stay in a self-quarantine for 1 to 2 weeks that we can do. So when
Martin, just shortly, because I just quick thing, because there's a lot of abbreviations here in your slide and what you're saying. Walter Neuenschwander just asked what PCR. PCR stands for. This is polymerase chain reaction. This is a test method for finding the virus in the bloodstream. So PCR is for testing. PEPP-PT, this is one of the methods used for building. It's actually a framework for building the contact tracing app. So just for information for those who haven't heard of that before. Sorry for interrupting you.
No problem. I think it's important to explain this, because these 2 tests, so the blood, but that antibody tests that are determined by the blood, can only say after about 2 weeks after you were positive, that you are affected by the virus, that you have some immunity. But there is no answer when you had the virus and how long. On the other side, the PCR test can only say if you have in actual time. Today, when you measure, you have a virus in you, but you cannot measure it before you are affected, and you cannot measure it a week or 2 or 3 after you are infected. So it's necessary to have both tests in a valuable situation to really have more information. So I will go on. So this voluntary app with a local situation. I'm not a technical specialist. There are more intelligent people than me. I learned that DP3T and PEPP-PT, based techniques should be a solution. But this voluntary app, simple, is only based on Bluetooth. And I think it's important that this will be used by a minimum 60% of persons that it has some effects. So if only 10 or 20% will do this, it will not work at all.
So after your presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about those two methods, the PEPP-PT and PEPP-PT, to give a little bit of understanding how it really works. Not in all technical detail, but at least so that you guys can understand what is meant by that. And we will also shortly talk about Bluetooth as a method.
My problem is that I'm not a specialist about these techniques. I was also copying this from internet, and I know that this DP3T is now the Swiss standard with Bluetooth. And as I understood, the PEPP-PT based was the European German-based tool. I don't know actual where they are, because they now also discuss about this decentral local apps. So I think the most important is that the local app that is now discussed in Switzerland to be free for everybody is only based on Bluetooth. And this is not an intelligent tool that cannot learn. So for me, this is not enough. This is one that is very important, that 60% of the person use it. But if we want to make any efforts, we need more. And so for me, and this was also with specialists I discussed with IT specialists, you can only learn or make learning an app if you make more data acquisition. And you need, beside Bluetooth, also VLAN data and GPS data. And this should be absolutely also voluntary, this data acquisition. But this must be central, because you cannot make this only decentral, local on the app, because Technic is not so far now. But the advantage, if you have further data that people give for free, as in situations when you are in a hospital, you also there give your further information about your health and about your operation, you give to the health personnel anonymously. It's not so that this is with your name coupled, and this is also not necessary here, but then the people can learn. So when I go to hospital, I'm happy when before me, all that problem had the same problem with me, their informations are used to help me. And so I'm normally also open to help with my information, that the next generation can profit also from the experience they have with me. So if this is possible to have some additional data, and I think only 20 to 30%, if people will really do this, give this additional data, in this evaluation, the algorithm can learn and also make the decentralized basic app more intelligent and can be further developed. And the aim for me, and you are the specialist in virtual intelligence, it must be that in some months the app is smarter than the virus or quicker. Like a chess computer, when you work with a chess computer, at the end you will lose again the chess computer. You have no chance. At the beginning you will win, at the end you will lose. So I think this app discussion we will go then further. But also the discussion about this mask. As you know, in Switzerland we had a long time not enough masks. If we have more information, we can a targeted use of mask by that people there are in shops, hairdressers, or in the public traffic, there makes sense, or if somebody was warned or has weak symptoms. This is for self-protection and for the protections of others. And clearly, we have to continue the physical distancing and all hygiene measures constantly. If we don't do this, it will not work. So it's as you see, it's one point of a whole system of measurements we have to take, but very important to learn a lot and to be more quick.
Before we continue, Martin, for a second, because we have two questions. If we could go just go back to slide 5. Thank you very much. It's highly condensed what you're telling here with so many numbers, and I'm going to refer to a lot of stuff again. So I've actually added Laszlo to the panel for a second because he had a question. Laszlo, would you be so kind just to repeat your question here in the round?
Yes, okay, thank you. Hello, gentlemen. So my question is, would you say that having the participation of the infected voluntary could actually reduce the efficiency of this initiative? You know, since you mentioned that the participation is actually anonymous, could it be actually compulsory? Because when it comes to AI, the more data it has, the better it becomes and the faster it will learn. Thank you.
Yeah. So let me help to understand the question a little bit again. You say, would it reduce the efficiency of initiative? So I'm looking at the text you typed in the F&A section. What do you really mean by that? So personal opinion would be, so if infected, so even if you're not infected but participate, and if you become infected, you warn other people voluntarily, you actually increase the quality of the data set, yeah? Because that's how it should work. So why do you mean it reduces the efficiency of what initiative?
By the initiative, I mean here this idea of creating this app and the movement tracking of the infected people. So if they can opt out that, no, I don't want to participate in this initiative, then it reduces the effectiveness.
Absolutely. I think this is also something Zak had in mind when he wrote his article. So we have a lot of pitfalls in there. It's a lot of things which we need to look at we'll do that after that as well. So all the things which are voluntary. So if it's voluntary, it means you can just don't do it, yes? But not mentioning that you have been infected, even if you're anonymous, means you actually bringing that whole idea to a stop, because that's how it works. So I give that's correct. The efficiency of initiative would end at the point that people stop declaring themselves infectious or not. Definitely.
The problem is now, we discuss now in Switzerland an app that is only based on Bluetooth, and it's absolutely for free. And you have not to use this. You have not to inform anybody. That's the one point. Second, you are not obligated to make a test when you have any symptoms. That is absolute free. On the other side, if you are tested, as you heard from Canton of Geneva, if you then don't inform when you are called about your positive situation, you have to give any answers with which person when you were together. So you have to talk with a call physically, and if you don't be correct with your doing and go out when you are affected, you have to pay perhaps up to 5,000 francs. So I see this is the wrong way. If you make a negative situation, if you are positive, then a lot of people will not test, will not use the app. You should go another way around. You should go, when a person goes to a test, it's a positive signal. And when she stays at home, it's also positive, and she got something. And not when she don't stay at home, will pay 5,000 francs. So we have big risk that now we do the wrong system for the people. They either do the wrong thing. And what's important, you have not an opt out of the app. It's in every place. It's an opt in to the Bluetooth app, so you can download and use it, yes or no. And this voluntary data is an opt in. It must be an opt in. It's not an opt out, because then the person has actually to decide, yes, I want to give more data to make more scientific work. That's the app that can learn more also from my information. I think it's very important. Then also the data that you give is absolutely, it's as safe as possible, and it's that you do it voluntarily. I think it's quite important. And it's that way without additional data. I'm sure that will not learn anything. I come to you want, in the next point, the next slide, I have explained this a bit. The situation that we have.
Maybe before we start with the last question, which is
Yep.
still open, PK, if you can change your name, we know a little bit better who you are. So PK is very short. Is asking how is the 60% number of users necessarily calculated? So this is a kind of benchmark where we say that at a minimum of 60% of the population using the app would actually make it effective. I also found another number, which is 30%, only half of it. I'm not sure, Zak, do you know how that might have been calculated? Do you have an idea?
Nobody knows. So
Nobody knows.
It originally came out of some Oxford University research, and it's been backed up by other research since. Australia launched their app on Sunday. They are claiming 40%, but clearly everyone's making it up. Nobody knows until it goes live. You know, get into it in more detail maybe in a few minutes. The real challenge with the apps is going to be what happens when they are used on a prolonged basis, because realistically in any large city, people are going to get lots of false positives. They're going to get lots of false alerts. Realistically, the second or third time that happens, they're going to stop using the app. And that is the real danger with this kind of voluntary contact tracing, is everyone will, not everyone, a fair number of people will start using it. They're not going to use it for very long. And that is the real challenge that governments are about to face.
Yeah, we can come back to that afterwards as well. It's thank you for the contribution. An interesting number, since I closed the poll we started in the beginning. So welcome again for all those who have joined us recently. We're talking about contact tracing apps today with an awesome list of panelists here. So coming back to the poll, would you personally support the usage of the app? 64% actually said yes, which means we are over the 60% threshold if it would work for the whole community. 32% actually say we don't know really. So the question is, and we can ask that question at the end again, if that kind of discussion we have today might change the attitude towards the app. Would you say at the end of this session today, yes, I'm not going to use it, or you say, yes, it has to be on my agenda, I have to use it? Let's talk about it later. Thanks. Sorry for Martin, and you can continue right now.
No problem. Perhaps about this 60%, I was reading that in Singapore, only around 25 to 30% use this app, and they had again problems with growing cases. So that is some sort of indication that perhaps 30% is not enough. If it's 60% is enough, I think it will depending. Important is that people that are moving a lot are using the app. It makes no sense that the people there are only in their homes or in hospitals are doing the app. And I think it's more important that the people that are around in public traffic, in restaurants, in shops, if they use it in a huge amount, this app, I think it will have a big impact. And also, the more intelligent the app is, I think the more learnings the app can do, the more, the less people must use it, that it works. And if 60% we use a very intelligent app, I'm sure the app will be quicker than the virus, because the virus you can calculate. It's a bit physics, it's a bit chemistry, but it's not so difficult. But now we don't know anything, but we can learn about it. And so if you agree, I go to this big question: is this Big Brother, or is this data questions a hysteria? I say it's at least it's balancing of the goods. So first, an intelligence app primarily stores data locally, is anonymously, and the data sovereignty lies to the owner. So this is the basics. But I would prefer, as I mentioned, the collection and anonymization of the VLAN, GPS, and Bluetooth data. So this would allow safe warnings, recalculations, and there you can see and it's a big difference. If only Bluetooth data, perhaps you cannot see if this person was in a bar inside or in a garden restaurant. And perhaps it's a big difference. If you are in a bar, perhaps if you are an hour in a bar and you are affected, all 20 or 30 people in this bar should be warned, because there is very close, people are together, but the room is also 200 square meters. Or outside in a garden restaurant where it's windy, perhaps only the 3 or 4 people on the same table are affected and all the rest has no effect. So there's a big difference, but Bluetooth will not make this difference. If you have also VLAN and GPS, you can make this difference. Another example, if you are in 2 different apartments or in one apartment, the Bluetooth data cannot find the difference perhaps, because if you are directly on the same wall, but in 2 different apartments, Bluetooth says you are less than 3 meters or less than 2 meters, and you are an hour sitting there. But if you have GPS and VLAN data, each apartment has another VLAN normally, then the app can learn, oh, okay, there are 2 separate VLANs, and also GPS data is not the same place. So this is not one apartment, these are 2 apartments. So here you can see that only Bluetooth data will not give us enough information. With all information, you can do more. And my wish would be that an app can local recalculate and anonymized VLAN GPS data. But I learned from specialists that this is not possible yet. Then when you want this data, you have to have a central storage for the moment. Perhaps in some years, it's also possible that you have not to store this central. So, and second, what we say, everybody gives out a lot more data today, and also private information via internet, via mobile phone, and also apps that you use today on your mobile phones, and usually does not even know which data is used for what. So for some apps on your handy, you have to use it really, you have to give free your photos. Do you know where your photos are then, or which person could use it? Nobody knows. We are not sure about this, but we don't think about it. Here we have an absolutely clear situation for what we want to use this app, and it's very close to use. So the energy revolution is next point. It's not thinkable out with smart grid or smart sensors in appliances. But then theoretically, somebody can know when you open your refrigerator or you wash at home. That's possible, theoretically, because the data is somewhere. Or on the other hand, the car manufacturers, as Tesla, as I know, has already collecting data. So without a lot of data and 5G, self-driven vehicles are unthinkable. So somebody could know where you are driving too fast, because always the velocity is tracked. And if the wife at home opens the fridge while the husband is parked in the no parking zone with his mistress in the car, somebody can take this data and can figure out it. So this is not the future. This is possible today. And we all know these data are very sensitive. And I think it's the wrong way to say now this app is very dangerous, it's Big Brother. I think we should discuss absolutely in all our life how we will deal with the privacy of data. And I think that most important thing is the sovereignty always is in the data owner's side. But here now, the app that we discuss is only for a pandemic cases. And it's really a balancing of interests in a triangle of health protection, of economic, social freedom, that was also important values, and the data protection. And for me, it's clear, in dubio, I give some priority to the health and the economy, and lose perhaps a security of data from 99.9 to 99%. when I have some data more in a central storage. Or another question, whose freedom should be widened higher? The freedom of the individual that don't want to use an app because of his absolute privacy protection and still goes to a restaurant and possibly infects many people there, or the freedom of the person at risk with perhaps a high blood pressure to be able to move around in society, for example, also in a restaurant. Which freedom has to be weighted higher? This is a question we can discuss, but both are values in our society, and we have to make this balancing of the goods. And so, to close, one for all for one, at Smart Start, you can find the whole paper on my homepage when you are interested. And I'm open for questions and discussions because it's a very important topic that will have a lot of time in the next years, because data storage and data sovereignty is a very important topic for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin, for your presentation. One organizational question. Will PowerPoint slides or stuff be available for us later on? Can I post it for people to download?
Yes, but my English is not the perfect, so I'm a bit fear that my bad English will then be on all over the world. So my privacy for my bad English, I will not show to everybody. But yes, you can do it.
Okay. Anyway, for all those who have been just joining recently, the whole session will be recorded as always and will be available on the YouTube channel, which means that your slides are up on YouTube anyway. So sorry for it. I'm not going to play out.
Privacy has no value, as I know. But I'm
Okay.
a person, I'm a political person, then you are always open.
That's good. Coming back to what you basically said in the end as well. So what are we really talking about? I mean, this is in a deep health situation, and it's not just fun and not just fun talking about that stuff. And we shouldn't care about how if it's grammatically correct the English or not. It's really about what you try to bring in as in the discussion, and that's what we're going to follow up here. I saw, Zak, you have been already trying to answer questions which came up. I'm going to take those questions I've seen here from Christoph, for example, who was referring to a statement from Zak and from Walter about cheating the app, and Elsner talking about another way for people to step out of using it because they don't want the people to know that they are infected. Those questions we will talk about a little bit later, so this will be answered in the discussion as well. Just to reassure you guys that this is not just staying open, although Zak already has answered a few things. I would like to go on and share a few overviews before we enter into the discussion, what Martin actually triggered here. I'm going to share my presentation for a second. Yeah, so this is just to give you an understanding of a very, very basic process of how that app really works. I'm not sure, can you see it in full or is it only part of the screen? Can you see the full slide?
Now it's better.
It's better? Okay. So you should see the full slide. It's not in presentation mode, so it's much easier to follow here. So how does it work really? So you have an app installed. I have an Android-driven or an iOS device. Doesn't matter. That's why Apple and Google are just trying to figuring how they could work together to make that possible at all. So you install the app, and as Martin already mentioned, it's basically built on using Bluetooth as technology. Bluetooth, I don't know your personal habits. Usually I disable Bluetooth. It's not normal that I use it for 1,000 reasons. I hate too much radiation on my phone. It's okay if I check my emails from time to time. I don't want to have it active. But I personally opinion again, I'm would be willing to use the app just to give other people the opportunity and myself the opportunity to understand if I'm at risk and my wife is at risk because she's seriously ill and we need to take precaution measures. So for us, it's also personal reasons. So all the discussions around the contract tracing apps goes down to some very specific aspects of how the architecture of the software is really built. As you can see, so there's the app, and on the right side, there's that part here, there's a slight idea of how it works. So instead of having full names, of course, there will be IDs for people. So an ID like 117 is not a name for you. You would not even remember what kind of person that was. And you would not even be able to check if it's the person you met yesterday or 10 minutes before. It's just impossible from just using the app. And so what it does is the app will collect the data about what kind of people you met for a longer time in terms of minutes, and in measuring the distance, which brings up a lot of technical issues because that's not very easy. And it's not very easy with Bluetooth specifically. So there are some questions like how long would it take to be infected by someone? We have so many questions out there about how the coronavirus spreads, and it's even still today, it's so hard to answer questions like how it really works, and if it's just like being in touch with food, for example, or touching a table or so, if that could be infectious. But we are still unclear about all that, and we don't have scientific proof of that. So the basic assumptions therefore in the app is that there should be at least 15 minutes exposure to someone who is really near to you, which means less than the 2 meters. That's the 1.5 meters we have in reality, where we need to distance from each other. That's it. So that's the basic, very basic rule how that works, the algorithm, how it works. But having that in the building, in the programming pipeline, of course, from a research perspective, thousands of questions pop up. That's what you see in the black box here. So once you have someone using an app, you can actually collect location data. So not only that you have been in touch with someone somewhere, but where was it really? Was it during an event? Was it at the supermarket? Was it in a chat in your private home? So this is really measuring the place where you are geographically placed. Movement profiles could theoretically build. So this is like contact information or identifiable characteristics you can see here. These are all possible data points which could be measured, but not in the basic system. But this leaves a lot of space for the discussion. This is actually one of the points why people discuss it and why the privacy issue comes up. Maybe if you could say the app is just a small version of just trying to figure out if you have been in touch with someone infectious, that's it, we might be done. And it might be less a privacy issue. Second, and this is why these two standards we heard from you before, this is the overview from DP-PT and PEPP-PT. These are the two standards which have been discussed recently, following a little bit a different point of architecture. I'll come back to that in a second. This refers to that kind of, where does the processing of that information take place? So you can, in the software architecture or hardware architecture, you can think of two possible ways, of course. You can say, hey, let's do the smartphones, make them smarter, and do all the processing on your smartphone. That would be the decentralized model, which is the Swiss standard at the moment, which has been discussed. And the PEPP-PT standard, which has been in discussion here in Germany, especially for some time now, but has been kicked out from the government here, was more focused on a centralized processing of the data. It's not just like centralized is bad by itself. If you think for a second, that's the discussion we might have in the end here as well. Centralized means that researchers could have access to much more enriched data sets. So Martin, you mentioned that we could use AI, machine learning, to actually build models to understand better in what kind of situation things happen, what is more likely a scenario, and being infectious to people. Those kind of models require full access to data sets. I doubt, I haven't seen a specification yet, but a decentralized approach to that problem would help us to do that analysis. I say, I guess, no, it won't be possible because the data is on the smartphone. It's not available to research in that sense. Another thing which is also technically based is, you should know, since we have the idea and the knowledge from research, that we have a 14 days period of incubation. But the idea in the tech was to only store data for those 14 days and not longer. So this is one algorithm, one parameter built into the algorithm as well. So how does that start and how does it work if you really start it? Say, maybe I get diagnosed as being infectious because I have symptoms and I talk to my physician, says, yes, you are probably likely that you have it. And we do a test and it actually will be confirmed by the test. I now have the voluntary ability to use the app and to say, hey, I'm infectious, and send out the warning to the system. So that's the part Zak 2 here, and will inform the list of users I have been in touch with for a longer time. Remember what I said, for 50 minutes to 2 meters distance, and will inform them that there might be a problem with it. They might have been in touch with someone and the virus might be spreading to them as well. So this is voluntarily done. The fourth step would be that that person who has actually been issued a warning can inform the health department that that person has been in touch with someone just based on what the app says, and go into voluntary quarantine for the time of 14 days until it's clear if you are infectious for other people or not, if you have something, if you have a virus or not. So this is the basic process behind it. And just going back to the discussion we have at the moment. So the PEPP-PT standard, there are a lot of links to the code on GitHub as well. I will send you the links during the session here and in the chat window, which will be also available, of course, later on the YouTube video on YouTube. So you can check the code yourself. So Pan-European Privacy Preserving Proximity Tracing, PEPP-PT standard, is de facto still in development, but it's just not supported by the governments so far. So it's neither supported by the German or the Swiss government as I have seen. So DP3D is actually built by a team which was part of a European initiative, but split it and left it because of transparency concerns about what kind of architectural discussion, because we said we don't follow up on the centralized model. We need and we prefer the decentralized model. So that's why we left. So this is DP3D is actually the preferred model in Switzerland and in Germany at the moment. So the people are following up on it. But, and that's why I posted here the release date, it's expected to, in the first step, to be probably released May the 11th. So in less than, let's say, 13 days. Let's hope that we really do that. Also, just to mention, this is something, Zak, I would like to come back to you again. So the Apple and Google stuff. Since Apple has the ownership about the iOS world and the iOS operating system, and Google, of course, have another hemisphere of big user population for Android world, it was clear, and it was a good thing actually, that those giants joined forces and tried to work together and building a kind of synchronized infrastructure based on Bluetooth. So currently we plan, that's why I typed in the date here as well. So April the 28th, it's actually today. So the release day for the API should be today. Let's check if that's really true or not. And maybe it's even a few days later. And the idea is in the medium term, so since when the API has been released, but there will be measures in place that we try to build all those kind of tools and features and algorithms inside of the platform itself. So it will become part of the operating system, not only on additional classes you can actually load on your smartphone. So this is just
Martin, can I have a short, because this picture I think is very interesting. But for me, it's very important that these two systems should not play against other. For me, I think both are possible and should in a modular way. So if you have a basic, a DPD3T, it should be possible to go on a PEPP-PT system without having complete different software. And I know from IT specialists that this is possible, but I think if they don't discuss with each other again, then at the end, you have two developments, they are parallel and not compatible. And we know about the problems when each makes his way without talking with another. So I think it's talking between the people is the most important to find a solution that has possibilities for both ways and not the one is the best and the other is the wrong way. So at the end, both are possible. And but I think it's important also for Apple and Google at the end that they are such an open source situations that everybody can use both or only one of them.
Yes, I agree fully. Thanks for that contribution. I think it's very worth to discuss as well. To make the point clear and to emphasize what you're saying here. So Chris Bose, who's actually, I wouldn't say the mastermind, but one of the main heads behind the PEPP-PT standard, who unfortunately cannot join us at the moment because he is in a call with America at the moment. So he was invited to speak here as well. He's actually not a proponent for either one or the other architecture. So not centralized, not decentralized. If you read through his interviews he gave, he clearly stated that he is actually supporting both ways. And so why is that important? It's not only about engineering and how to build stuff. It's really about how you can work with the data and how you can exploit data. And this is one of the questions from here, from the audience. Do you think there are potential chances these apps will pave the path for forced mass surveillance in future by government? How law can help us? I try to answer that immediately. Yes, for sure. That's always a problem because in case of a centralized system, of course, if someone collects such kind of information, and we see that from other countries, and we know that from other countries, and they're actually the apps we build in those countries, but we're collecting much more data, from facial recognition data to geographic data and so on. So we are aggregating much more data in the hands of the wrong people. This is, of course, always a cool stuff for mass surveillance and to get ideas of what your opponents are doing at the moment and with whom we are meeting. So there has been a kind of security assessment from the DP3T team about the PEPP-PT standard. I'm going to show you the link afterward as well, where we actually showed at that point of what kind of process you've seen before, what kind of interception could take place, where can data be exploited and misused. So yeah, to answer the question, it's possible to build mass surveillance. But, and I come back to what Martin has been proposing, come back to the situation we're currently facing. What price are we currently paying? So we have a poor situation, which means we have people suffering and dying, and a health system which is in danger of just collapsing. And we have an economy which is under severe threat. We're losing a lot of money. We're losing people's hope for the future, which can be a health issue as well. So this is not easy. And in that kind of extreme situation, I could imagine that a contact tracing app, if applied, if people really use it and not misuse it, could be very helpful in tracing down the roots of the virus and help us to open up more freely, so to get the economy working faster, and still taking care of those who are affected. Even this has also been said quite clearly. You don't even need to know about your health situation. Sometimes you don't know it and you can die from that virus just because you don't know that you have a health issue. We saw that in the past as well. Okay, so this is a short overview about the overall structure and architecture of it. Martin, your video is just off for a second. I don't know if you know that. Zak, your video is also off. Thanks for saving the bandwidth. But since we're turning to you now, it's cool to have you back. Just have a quick look at the questions which are still open. I think this anonymous audience here, I think these apps are totally overrated. It only measures which people have been near me. If a person sits 30 minutes behind me in a train, there is hardly any risk of infection. Nevertheless, an app would give me an alarm. So there will be more false alarms than anything else. Why should we give up the privacy of everyone for such a bad estimation? So a lot of assumptions in there, but it's good to talk about that. The first thing, it's not about 30 minutes behind me in a train. Yes, that's right. We have a problem with Bluetooth. You can even have a glass behind you, between you, which separates you. So there might be less risk of being infectious. But this is like an alpha and beta failure error, you know. So it's maybe better to give an alarm for just no reason, and no alarm for you should have been warned. That might be something we need to discuss. Do we give up privacy? I doubt if we do that really, because from seeing the code in the public domain, you can have a look at it from the public discussion about privacy in this code. I think we did a good job in trying to avoid giving up privacy, because you are just a number. And if a number is decentralized on an app, you can even, it's really hard to find out who you are. There's some ways to check that, which has been discussed, but those guys are working on it. And I think if you balance and counterweight the measures and the wins, it's just that. What is the trade-off? Just better giving up a little bit privacy for being in the situation where you can open up the economy faster or not? I mean, that's a public discussion.
Definitely. Perhaps this example in the train, I'm not so sure if you sit back by back, you have no risk to be affected. Because as I think in a train, 1 hour between Zurich and Bern, where a lot of people are in one place, then the risk is quite high. So I think a warning more there would help to find very quick the really infected. The most important for me is that the test will be very quick, so that within some hours, when you are warned, you can go to a mobile test, and within some hours you have the result. Negative, no problem. You can go on working as or in a vacation, what you want. And if you're affected, then you have very quick an answer. So, but an app that is absolutely perfect, that will never be working. But what I say is, the more data you give and the more learning software you can, the more intelligent the app can say, are we in a train that are really separated places, or is it an open bar? I think that it's the advantage, you have more data. But absolutely safe that you have no false alarms will never be possible. So that is one of the risks you have. But I think it's a chance more to get quick informations than to have some false alarms.
Yeah, thanks for answering that as well. Thank you for contribution. Also looking at what Walter Neuenschwander here wrote and asked, actually. Zak, hence, according to slide number 4, that's from my presentation before, I would suggest that the doctor who has done the test has to confirm the state positive on the app. That's correct. So looking at the architecture of the app, it's really that, indeed. So the question before you had, can someone can someone cheat the app just by saying, I'm positive, but I'm not positive? Has no way to occur, because a doctor indeed has to say you're infectious before that. And I think that was built into the flow of the user interactions in the app system. Zak, I would like to welcome you here again in the discussion. Hope, Walter, that was an answer which is satisfying. Just let me know if it's not, and we can continue. Before we can start to talk, I would like to show the people actually how we met. And I was just listening one time again to my LinkedIn stream, and I saw a post about your article from April 12th, so just 16 days in history. You wrote an article, "Forget Apple and Google, here's the real challenge for COVID-19 contact tracing," which actually made me curious to understand what you're saying here. And just can you give us a short summary of what are the main statements and the main essence we could get out of those kind of article?
Sure. I mean, look, I think there are so many issues with the idea of a voluntary smartphone contact tracing system that it clearly is starting life with a real challenge on its hands, regardless of whether you go for either of the European standards or what Apple and Google are doing. If you just start to break it down, we've talked about the 60% number. The clear point is, unless you get significant compliance, it doesn't work. I think Martin mentioned Trace Together, which is the Singaporean app. They've had 20% of the population, 1 million out of the 5 million Singaporean citizens have downloaded it. Australia launched their app on Sunday night. A couple of million people had downloaded it by the next day. They need to get 10 to 15 million Australians using this app in order for it to be effective. Just using their numbers, they're not going to get there. And that clearly is the challenge. Well, that's the first challenge. The second challenge is even the people who will use it, because it is a gimmick, it is a new technology, they need to keep on using it, and they need to keep using it and adhering to all of the instructions they get through the app. So if you live in a city like Paris or Frankfurt or London, you are going to get constant alerts, particularly if people can trigger an alert by claiming to be self-diagnosed, to have symptoms. The idea that you will always go and get tested, or you will self-isolate and then you won't have symptoms, you will stop using the app. Then you have the issue that there are many phones that simply can't get the app. So Huawei phones that have been launched in the last year can't get the app because it relies on a Google mobile services that's not available on those Huawei phones. Any phones that don't have the right to have Bluetooth can't use the app. So any phone that's more than 5 years old probably can't use the app. So you find that older people, poorer people, won't have access to the technology. But for me, the most critical issue is the demographic split, which I've talked about. I think I talked about in this article. I've certainly talked about in others. You have, with coronavirus, a split between people who are concerned and people who are not concerned. And in any of the big cities, I'm sure we're all in Europe at the moment, if you go to parks at the weekend, you will see that split. You will see lots of younger people who are much more oblivious to the concerns of becoming infected. They are not going to use this app. They are not going to adhere to it, certainly over a long period of time. The people who will adhere to it are older people and people with underlying health conditions who will be nervous. But obviously when those two demographics mix, unless they're all using the app, it doesn't work. And then you have the danger which has been proposed for the anti-mask view, which is it creates a false sense of security. People believe that they are being told where they are likely or potentially have been infected, but actually the system isn't deployed widely enough, then it's not working. So for me, ultimately, the argument on privacy, I think, is a bit of a rabbit hole, and I can talk more about why I think that. I don't think this is going to lead to mass surveillance, because I work in the security industry, and you don't have a voluntary system for mass surveillance. It doesn't work because the people you're really interested in opt out, so it doesn't work. So I don't think there's a privacy issue. I think there's a compliance issue. And I think unless governments can find a way to mandate the use of this app, or to connect it to some kind of QR code that gives you the ability to use public transport or go into a restaurant or whatever else, they're not going to get enough compliance to make this work. What they're going to find is what we've seen in Korea, in China, in Thailand, is that you actually need manual contact tracing. You just need an army of tracers who actually pick up the phone and text people and look at where you've been. Or you need to do what China have done and what Israel flirted with and has now decided to switch off, which is you need to use mandatory contact tracing using the underlying telecoms infrastructure, and you need to just know where people have been. So you're not looking for them to download an app to opt in, you just use the telecoms metadata. That does work, but that will create a privacy stink, as it has done in Israel, and ultimately will get switched off. So I think in this and in other pieces, I think there needs to be a better debate and understanding of how these technologies are actually going to work in the real world. we're about to find out. Singapore have seen it. I think Martin's mentioned they've got a new spike in cases. Only 20% of the population are using their app. It's been launched for some time now. We've seen Australia launch. The UK are launching in the next 3 weeks. They've just said that they're not going to go with Apple and Google standard. They're going to go with a centralized version of the app. They won't get the level of compliance that they need, the level of take-up that they need. So 3 months down the road, I think we're going to be debating this again and looking for a different way of doing this.
So this is interesting. Just for giving the people a little bit background, you have a huge expertise in the area of surveillance, right?
Correct.
So what's why? What are the type of things you're doing normally, usually?
So I've spent, I don't know, 15 years in cybersecurity, selling surveillance technologies to government agencies around the world, both in terms of kind of the tracking and location stuff all the way through to facial recognition and all the rest of it. I understand, and that's clearly what I write about, what I cover. I think there is a backlash misunderstanding of the value of the technology, of the data that is going to be thrown off by these apps. The centralized apps, I mean, and you talked about it before, just to be clear, the argument from the health departments is that unless you centralize this data, you can't start to run analytics to work out whether it's crazy data or not. Was somebody really on a crowded train, or did they pass you in the street? The danger with the decentralized model is all you know is that your phone was in the proximity of another phone for a period of time. You can't know more than that because there's no centralized data to compare it to anyone else. You're going to get a lot of false alerts. Obviously, if you centralize the data, there is the option or the risk that can be reverse engineered, and you can be identified based on where you've been and where you go. Any agency would be able to work out who you are, and obviously that does create a sense of nervousness. But agencies are not going to use this technology. I think the surveillance risk is slightly different, which is this technology is now being made available. So what you're finding now is that there is a huge number of software developers and app developers that are pushing out Bluetooth contact tracing. That is going to be out in the real world. And there are going to be regimes out there that are going to be able to mandate the use of these technologies. They're going to enforce their use on devices within their countries because they're going to have been developed. It's going to add a data collection tool set to the stuff that is already out there. It adds a dimension to what we can do with cell network tracking, with the kind of the cookies that get thrown off by the apps that we have on our devices. It's just another data load. But I think the voluntary stuff we're talking about in the West shouldn't concern people from a privacy perspective. I think it absolutely should concern people from an efficacy perspective. I don't think it's going to work, and I don't think it's going to get used long term. That is actually the issue that we should be debating.
That's interesting. It's completely an opposite of a discussion we have at the moment. This is why I like it. it's just not the typical argument here. Coming back to some of the questions which relate to what you're just saying, so from Elsner here, why do you think that people will be willing to use such an app? There's no personal interest for an individual user. To the contrary, you have risk to get a message that you need to stay in quarantine. For some people, this means a loss of income. As a result, I would not install the app in the first place. So this, again, it's not about surveillance. It's again about a usage of the app. So do you confirm? Do you think that makes sense? Or do you think you have an opposite opinion?
Personally, I think that's exactly right. I think that in a nutshell sums up the issue. The fact is, if you're 75 years old and you have an underlying health condition, you will use the app. And every time you get an alert, you will self-isolate and you're going to get tested. And if you're 25 years old and you have no underlying health conditions, you probably won't use the app. And if you do, exactly as the person who raised the question said, you're just not going to bother. You're not going to go and get tested. You're certainly not going to self-isolate. You're not going to miss work. You're not going to miss going out with your friends because you're not that worried about getting infected. And you'll be oblivious to the fact that your lack of compliance is putting other people at risk if this is what the country is relying on. The only way you can make something like this work at the numbers that are required is to mandate it. I'm sure many people who are listening to this have been to Singapore. If Singapore cannot get more than 20-ish% of their population to run this app, what chance do you have in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Italy, and in the UK? You have no chance. But it's going to take some time before I think that realization hits home.
Yeah, so looking at the F&A section again, where you can actually post your questions, guys, for all those who are in the audience at the moment. If you open F&A, you see another question from PK, who's actually did some maths here, trying to understand what kind of number is it, 60%, what it really means. Whatever it means, it's still probably the problem of finding enough users out there which help you be in a safe place. Yeah, it's actually what you said before. The same problem.
I want to be clear, because I think it's important to understand this statistic. The 60% statistic that came from Oxford University is 60% of a population. It's 80% of smartphone users is what they came up with. 80%, 8 out of every 10 smartphone users need to run the app to have full efficacy. In Australia, where they're talking about 40%, again, there you'll be talking about probably 60-65% of smartphone users. I mean, we all know how difficult it is to get people to go along with things as a government. When Singapore managed to get 20-ish% compliance, that was the record for a Singaporean government app to be downloaded by the population. So just that 20% level was a record. Now they need 3 times that in order to get where they need to be. It's been around for some time. They are not seeing, hundreds of thousands of people download this every week.
To summarize a little bit and to bring Martin also again into the discussion here, if you would be the consultant of us, the government, would you say it makes sense to build the app or just skip it because you will never get the people to use it correctly or efficiently in a way which makes sense?
As I told, the app is one very important measurement against COVID. It's not the only one. And I want to say also something very important. Also, 60% or not 60%. Every person that uses an app helps to reduce the classical contact tracing. So with phones, that is a very slow method to really identify people when they are positive affected, to call them, to ask them with which persons they were together the last 2, 4, 5 days, because it needs a lot of time. And the more the intelligent app can help to reduce these phones that you have to do, the more effective the whole measurements will be. So I think this is important, that the app is not the only solution for everything. The app is a very good help to get more information and to find quicker infected people, that all others can go around and work and only are short time isolated. Because also situations when you have to call everybody is always takes so much time, then people are very long away from their work. And if you have more and quicker answers, they are very shortly away. And I think to use the app, it's the wrong way, as I said, to make punition if somebody doesn't use anything. But on the other way, you should give a positive impact if you use. So you can collect points, you can win something. Young people, if they can look it like a game, I can win it if I use it. I think you have to be a bit clever to really persuade people that they help system to get more liberation for everybody and to give some benefits and not a punishment if you don't use it. It's the wrong way to make a bad situation. You make a bonus something and not a malus.
So to sum it up what you're saying, you would basically say it's better do it, use the app, because we can only gain. It's better than just doing nothing, and it's part of a larger set of instruments we will use. Zak, coming back to what you said before and following your arguments, have you actually been saying it doesn't make sense to use the app, or to offer kind of road how to use it?
I think the idea of digital contact tracing, backing up or backed up by manual contact tracing methods makes absolute sense. My issue is the view that this is watered down from a privacy perspective and then is going to be voluntary. That's my issue with this. I think if you want to do it properly. I think you need to mandate its use. You need to link its use to something. Your right to travel, your right to work, your right to be out in public, whatever that is. And then you get, as they do in China or whatever else, you get a QR code. It gives you a green code on your phone because you haven't been warned that you've been in the proximity of an infected person. Let's be absolutely clear. If you want this to work effectively, you need to do it properly. You need to say, look, if you get an official warning on your phone to say you've been in the proximity of someone who's been properly tested and is infected, you get a red QR code until you're tested and clear. And that means you can't get on public transport, you can't go in a restaurant, you can't go into a cinema or a theatre because you may be infected. That's how you do effective digital contact tracing. If you leave it for everyone to volunteer to download the app, volunteer to adhere to its instructions, self-isolate, go and get tested, you don't know whether they have or they haven't, there's no marker on this to say whether you bothered to go and get testing. What you'll find is even if you get short-term compliance, it will fade over 6, 8, 12 weeks. We're already seeing, I live in London, we're already seeing the lockdown, which was a mandatory lockdown, people are starting to play around the edges of it because it's been going on too long, they're bored of it. It's the same thing. This will be interesting for a little while and infections will go down and people will stop using it and then infections will spike. I think the best, final thing saying that the best way to think about a voluntary digital contact tracing is if the government had come and said, look, we're going to do a voluntary lockdown. It's up to you guys. Stay at home or don't. But we'd really like you to. Would everyone have stayed at home or would everyone have just kept on going out and about? And we all know the answer to that question.
So thanks, Martin. Thanks, Zak, for your closing words. I would just reissue the poll again. Let's see if it works. So just starting the question from the beginning again. Did anything have changed for you? Would you use it? Would you still don't care? Still don't know if you would use it? Would be interesting to hear for us right now. Also for you guys, since I'm going to upload the video tomorrow, so Martin has wrote down his thoughts in an article. I will enclose the link to that article on the page of on YouTube as well. There has been some research about how to work with such apps and how to make it decentralized, published in Cornell University. I will link to that as well. The GitHub repositories are available. All those links will be ready. There's a PDF, a joint statement from researchers from all over the world, actually promoting the use of a decentralized app. So there's a lot of interesting statistics out there why people would say they vote against app installation. In this case, it's a German thing. The article from Zak, we've heard about it. Let's see what we have here. So that's YouTube. Martin, I think we're done. So these are the links I'm going to post on YouTube. So coming back to the poll, to the final closing of today. Oh, that has significantly changed. I'm going to close the poll. Let's see if you can see the results. Can you see them? If not, I'm going to read it out loud to you. Would you personally support the usage of? So this has gone down heavily. So we had 64% in the beginning. So we now support usage of. We are now at 33%. So it's actually not using it. Don't use at all has climbed up 22%. Don't know, still 39%. We have still a huge area of people who seem still not really sure about what to do, if it makes sense or not. So we might have, and we probably have, ongoing discussion in a couple of days, because this is just real time now. This is just actual information, and it's important that we move forward here. And it seems that most of the people who have been in support now have changed their mind and came up to a different conclusion. So since I have no open questions here, thanks again for all you for participating today. It was awesome to have you as an audience again. Thanks for my panelists here. Thanks for Martin for joining us. Thanks for Zak for taking the time, spare time, both of you. I know you have a lot of work else to do, and it was a pleasure to have you here. Also, thanks for just freely sharing your thoughts and ideas and your opinion.
Thank you.
So going to stop that now. I wish you all stay safe, please. And